Let's now take a look at a multi-page web application. The Halloween Superstore shopping cart application lets users purchase Halloween products online. We will look at the first two pages of the application, which gets product data from a database, stores data in session state, and uses 3 business classes. So even though this is a fairly simple application, it certainly isn't trivial. Here we can see the first page of the shopping cart application. This page, named order.aspx, includes a drop-down list from which the users can select a product. The products are retrieved from an Access database via an Access data source control. Since the drop-down list is bound to the data source, the product names are displayed automatically. The product data is retrieved from an Access database named Halloween.mdb. This database includes a table named Products. The products table has these columns: Product ID, Name, Short Description, Long Description, Category ID, Image File, Unit Price, and On Hand. All of these columns except for Category ID and On Hand are used by this application. When the user selects products from the drop-down list, the code for the page retrieves the data for the selected product from the data source, which has retrieved the data for all products from the Access database. The data for the selected product is displayed in several labels. In addition, the image file column is used to set the image URL property of an image control, so the product image is displayed in that control. Once a product is selected, the user can enter a quantity and click the Add to Cart button. If the user clicks the Add to Cart button without entering a valid quantity, an error message is displayed. To accomplish that, 2 validation controls are included on the page. A required field validator makes sure that the user enters a quantity, and a range validator makes sure that the quantity is an integer that ranges from 1 to 500. If the user enters a valid quantity, a list that contains the user's shopping cart is updated with the product information. If the product isn't already in the shopping cart, a new item is added to the list. But if the product already exists in the shopping cart, let's add one that already is there, the quantity entered is added to the quantity for the product that's in the shopping cart. If you notice, Austin Powers is now at 4 at $79.99 each. Because the shopping cart must be retrieved and updated each time a product is added or updated, the list that represents the shopping cart is saved in session state. The cart page lists all the items currently in the shopping cart in a list box. To do that, it must retrieve the shopping cart from session state. To work with the items in the shopping cart, the user can use 2 buttons to the right of the list box. To remove an item, the user can select the item and click the Remove Item button. Or to remove all items from the shopping cart, the user can click the Empty Cart button. If the user wants to add items to the shopping cart, he can click the Continue Shopping button or return to the order page. Alternatively, the user can click the Checkout button to complete the order. However, the checkout method hasn't yet been implemented in this version of the shopping cart. So if the user clicks the Checkout button, a message is displayed to indicate that the checkout feature isn't implemented. In a complete application, of course, clicking this button would cause additional pages to be displayed to complete the order. Let's now have a look at the ASP.NET code in Visual Studio. The Solution Explorer shows the files and folders used by the shopping cart application. The root folder for the application contains 2 files for each of the application's web pages, one for the page itself and the other for the code behind file. For the cart page, for example, it has the cart.aspx file that contains the ASPX code that defines the cart page, and it also has the cart.aspx.cs file, and this is the code behind file that contains the C# code for the cart page. The same is done for the order page. As you can also see, the Solution Explorer has the app code folder, and it contains the three classes named cartitem.cs, cartitemlist.cs, and product.cs. These files contain classes that define the cart item, cart item list, and product classes required by the application. The app data folder contains an Access database named Halloween.mdb. The shopping cart application also includes a folder for images, and it has one file called banner.jpg, which provides the banner that's displayed on the top of each page. This folder also contains a subfolder named Products. This includes a separate image file for each product in the Products table of the database. Because the Products table includes a column named Image File that provides the file name for each of the product's image, the application can display the correct image for each product. Please note that the root folder also contains the web.config file. This file is added automatically when you create an application. Now let's take a look at the C# code for our application and the classes. The products.cs file contains the C# code for the product class. This class represents a product that the user can order from the shopping cart application. Note that it has a property for each of the columns in the products table except category ID and on hand. The cartitem.cs file contains the code for the cart item class, which represents one item in the shopping cart. You notice there is a no argument constructor and then a two parameter constructor. This constructor accepts two parameters that are used to initialize the product and the quantity. These properties hold the product object and the quantity for the cart item. Next, we have our variables, a product and a quantity variable. In addition to the constructors and properties, the cart item class includes two methods. The first one, add quantity, is used to add the quantity that's passed to it to the cart item. This method is called when the user adds a quantity to the cart for a product that's already in the cart. The second one, display, returns a string that formats the data in a cart item so that it can be displayed in one line of the list box on the cart page. The cart item list.cs file contains the code for the cart item list class, which represents a list of cart item objects. This list is defined in a private field named cart items at the beginning of the class. Then the constructor for this class initializes this field with a new list cart item object. Next, the count property. The count property is a read-only property that simply returns a count of the items in the list. It's followed by an overloaded indexer. The first indexer gets and sets a cart item in the list using the index that's passed to it. This indexer is used to get the items in the cart when they're displayed in the list box on the cart page. The second indexer is a read-only indexer. That gets a cart item using the product ID that's passed to it. This indexer is used to determine if a product is already in the cart. Notice that if a product with the specified ID isn't found, this indexer returns a null value. The first method, getCart, gets the cart item list object that's stored in session state. But first, it checks to see if a session state item named cart is equal to null. If it is, it means that a cart hasn't yet been created for the current user. Then, a new cart item list object is created and added to session state. You should notice two things about this method. First, it's a static method. That makes sense because it simply retrieves the cart item list object that's stored in session state. It doesn't work with the current cart item list object. Second, because this code is not in a code behind file, you can't use the session property of the page to refer to the session state object. Instead, you have to refer to the session state object through the HTTP context object for the current request. The next method, addItem, adds a new cart item to the cart item list. It accepts a product object and quantity as parameters. Then it creates a cart item object from these values and adds the cart item to the cart item list. The last two methods, removeAt and clear, should be easy to understand. The removeAt method simply removes the cart item at the given index from the list of cart items. And the clear method removes all cart items from the list. Here is the ASPX code for the order page. Since all the code for this page is generated by the Web Forms designer, you don't have to code any of it. The first group of 4 controls defines an image that's used for the banner, a label with the text, "Please select product," a drop-down list named DDL products, and the access data source that the drop-down list is bound to. Here, the auto postback attribute for the drop-down list is set to true. So the page will be posted back to the server when the user selects a product. In addition, the data source ID, data text field, and the data value field attributes specify how the drop-down list is bound to the access data source. The second group of server controls displays product information using several labels and an image control. A table is used to manage the layout of these controls so the image can be displayed to the right of the labels. The third group of server controls defines a label with the text quantity, followed by a text box named TXT quantity. Then, 2 validator controls provide data validation for the text box. Notice that both specify TXT quantity in the control to validate attribute and dynamic in the display attribute. The range validator also provides maximum value, minimum value, and the type attributes, which specify that the quantity must be an integer in the range from 1 to 500. The last group of controls for this page contains 2 buttons. Here, the onClick attribute names the event handler that will be executed when this button is clicked. In contrast, the BTN cart button uses the postback URL property to indicate that when the user clicks the button, the cart.aspx page should be requested rather than the order.aspx page. Since the causes validation attribute is set to false, the validation controls for the TXT quantity text box won't be executed when this button is clicked. Now let's look at the code for the order page's code behind file, order.aspx.cs. This code starts by declaring a class-level variable that will hold a product object that represents the item that the user has selected from the drop-down list. This variable is assigned a product object by the second statement in the page load method, which gets the product object by calling the getSelectedProduct method. The page load method starts by calling the dataBind method of the drop-down list if the page is being loaded for the first time. That is postback isn't true. This method binds the drop-down list to the access data source, which causes the data specified in the select command property of the data source to be retrieved. Then, this method calls the getSelectedProduct method, which gets the data for the selected product from the access data source and returns a product object. The object is stored in the selectedProduct variable, which is available to all methods in this class. Finally, the page load method formats the labels and the image control to display the data for the selected product. At that point, the order page is sent back to the user's browser. For many applications, you don't need to call the dataBind method in the page load method when you use data binding. Instead, you let ASP.NET automatically bind any data-bound controls. Unfortunately, this automatic data binding doesn't occur until after page load method has been executed. In this case, because the getSelectedProduct method won't work unless the drop-down list has already been bound, I had to call the dataBind method to force the data binding to occur earlier than it normally would. If the user clicks the Add to Cart button, the button add_click method is executed. After checking that the page is valid, this method calls the getCart method of the cart item list class to get the cart that's stored in the session state. Remember that if a cart doesn't already exist in session state, this method creates a new cart item list and stores it in session state. Also remember that the getCart is a static method, so you could call it from the class rather than an object created from the class. Next, this method determines whether the cart already contains an item for the selected product. To do that, it uses the indexer of the cart item list object to get the cart item object with the product ID of the product. If an item isn't found with this product ID, the add item method of the cart item list object is called to add an item with the selected product and the quantity to the list. In contrast, if an item is found with the product ID, the add quantity method of the cart item object is called to add the quantity to the item. Finally, this method uses the response.redirect to go to the cart.aspx page. Now let's look at the ASPX code for the second page of the shopping cart application, cart.aspx. Here the shopping cart is displayed in a list box control within an HTML table that allows for the remove and empty buttons to be displayed to the right of the list box. These two buttons, as well as the checkout button, use an onClick attribute to name the event handler that's executed when the button is clicked. The continue button uses the postback URL attribute to return to the order.aspx page. And the label LBL message is used to display messages to the user. Like the order page, this page also contains an image control that defines the image that's displayed in the banner. Notice here that the Enable View State property of the label is set to false. That way, the value of this label isn't maintained between HTTP requests. So if an error message is displayed in this label, it won't be displayed again the next time the page is displayed. Here's the code behind file for the cart page. This code starts by declaring a class level variable that will hold the cart item list object for the shopping cart. Then, each time the page is loaded, the page load method calls the getCart method from the cart item list class to retrieve the shopping cart from the session state and store it in this variable. If the page is being loaded for the very first time, the page load method also calls a display cart method. This method starts by clearing the list box that will display the shopping cart items. Then it uses a for loop to add an item to the list box for each item in the shopping cart list. Notice that this statement uses the count property of the cart item list object to get the number of items in the cart. If the user clicks the Remove Item button, the button remove_click method is executed. This method begins by making sure that the cart contains at least one item and that an item in the shopping cart list box is selected. If so, the remove@ method of the cart item list object is used to delete the selected item from the shopping cart. Then the display cart method is called to add the cart item to the list box again, but without the deleted item. If the user clicks the empty cart button, the button empty_click method is executed. This method calls the clear method of the cart item list object to clear the shopping cart. Then it calls the clear method of the items collection of the list box to clear that list. Please note, though, that instead of using the clear method to clear the list box, this method could call the display cart method. Similarly, the button remove_click method could use the remove method of the items collection of the list box to remove the item at the selected index instead of calling the display cart method. This just shows you that there is usually more than one way that methods like these can be coded. Note that the cart page doesn't contain a method for the click event of the Continue Shopping button. That's because this button uses the postback URL property to post directly to the order.aspx page. As a result, the cart page isn't executed if the user clicks the Continue Shopping button.